Slept on Cinema is sponsored by Training Ties, the ultimate shoe tying tool. If you know someone who's struggling with shoe tying for any reason, Training Ties is the perfect solution.
Even as disaster movies go, this one is a write-off.
Some cool special effects. That's about it.
Preposterous, slow, and unimaginative.
Like any other Emmerich movie, this one is loaded with humor, mostly unintentional.
Many of the cliches in this film predate the last Ice Age.
Even the names of the characters are weak and unoriginal.
Film viewers might want to put this off until sometime long after the day after tomorrow.
A shambles of dud writing and dramatic inconsequence, which left me determined to double my consumption of fossil fuels.
Welcome to this week's episode of Slept on Cinema. I'm your host, StanSteamer.
And I'm GrobeStreet.
This week we're getting into the 2004 disaster classic, The Day After Tomorrow. And this movie was a lot of fun. Again, I mean, it felt like we were back in our sweet spot. Disaster movies are always fantastic. This is no exception. The effects are amazing. The characters are amazing. The acting is amazing. It reminded me of a lot of other films that I liked, and I liked that. All in all, just an awesome time.
Yeah, great. Awesome disaster movie, which, it did feel a bit like home to be back in the disaster world, and I'm excited to get to it.
Yeah. So this movie, like all movies that we discuss in this podcast, are at or below 50% on Rotten Tomatoes for both critics and audiences. And we structured the podcast so that the first half is spoiler-free. Talk about some things to look for in the film, take a break, go watch the film, come back, and talk about some of the things we just went through.
The rotten premise. After climatologist Jack Hall is largely ignored by UN officials when presenting his environmental concerns, his research proves true when a superstorm develops, setting off catastrophic natural disasters through the world. Trying to get his son, Sam, who is trapped in New York with his friend Laura and others, Jack and his crew must travel by foot from Philadelphia, braving the elements to get Sam before it's too late. This is one of our highest, I think, cumulative scored movies. Critics 45%, audience 50%. So 95 total, which is pretty high for us. Audience at 50% makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it should be higher.
It should be much higher, yeah.
So this movie opened up May 28th, 2004. And as you might expect for something that is this highly rated for us, this movie crushed. So it opened number 2, but that was to the second week of Shrek 2, which you have no chance. So again, really opened effectively number 1. And it took in $68.7 million its opening weekend.
Oof.
That's coming in number 2. That is a number that most films would kill for right now for their opening weekend. I mean, that would have to be number 1 in almost every weekend now. So this film had a $125 million budget. Worldwide, this took in $552 million. And then this is sort of the heyday of DVD sales, another $110 million in DVD sales alone. So this thing made bank.
This was a sneaky DVD that people who collected DVDs or bought them, it was on the shelf.
It had to be on the shelf because the effects were awesome. So TVs were starting to get good and DVDs were starting to be everywhere and cheap enough that you could buy some and have a pretty good collection. So this might not be the first movie you'd buy, but if you had any sizable collection, this was going to be part of it.
Oh, yeah. You just went to Circuit City and got yourself a nice big screen and some stereo. You want an HD DVD in and watch these effects for sure.
Yeah. I feel like this would be a great movie, too, for showing at Circuit City to show off the TVs.
I think they did.
Yeah. So it was filmed in Canada. And fun fact is that it was the highest grossing movie filmed in Canada when it came out, which I guess not surprising because it grossed a shit ton of money.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And for us, this is also our second Canadian filmed movie in a row, which I was surprised. Yeah.
What did we do last?
The Voyeurs.
Oh, The Voyeurs. Wow, that's a Canadian movie.
I mean, that was very much a Canadian Montreal film. This just happens to be filmed in Canada, but still 2 Canadian films back to back, 2 great movies.
Yeah, 2 great movies, a little bit different in their style, but both great in their own way.
not a lot to get into in the background, but I think the special effects are worth talking about a little bit. And it's interesting because there's another film that we've talked about doing, which is Godzilla, the 1998 Godzilla film, which same director. So this is Emmerich, the director here, and in Godzilla. It seems like his experiences in Godzilla really shaped how he wanted to tackle this film. So Godzilla, they were really trying to rush the special effects and the post-production of that film, and they were rushed to meet a deadline. And the effects in that film are nowhere near as good as they are here. So here, Emmerich insisted on over a year of post-production effect work to make sure that everything was really to his specifications. They had 416 different special effects, and it was a good combination of practical and CGI. And this was sort of the era where you could go really wrong with CGI, but I think they blended that practical effects and CGI really seamlessly in this film. Just absolutely great job. It reminded me of Dante's Peak in that respect.
Yep.
And their real focus was making sure the cities looked real, and I think they did. They had over 1,000 people working on the special effects for this film. And for Manhattan, they digitally scanned 13 blocks of the city with LiDAR, which is this, can make 3D models of whatever you're scanning. And they then took over 50,000 pictures of buildings in New York and mapped them sort of like a puzzle all over this 3D model that they had made with the LiDAR. And you can tell, I mean, that it looks unbelievably realistic. It's for what they were doing at the time with the technology they had. I mean, this is over 20 years ago.
It makes sense why there's the amount of it in New York, looking at those mapped out cityscapes, because it looks amazing. And you're right.
Unbelievable.
The CGI can be really weird in that zone in 2004. Looking back on it can look a little bit goofy. And it's funny, these are the shots now that I feel like would just be, I don't know, we did birdies on here, but it feels like a drone shot for New York. But prior to that, you had to, build that yourself with CGI. And they did an awesome job, because you're right. So many movies, I think, kind of lose you a little bit with, especially these disaster movies, if it's not done right. They can lose you in the effects pretty quickly. But this movie is not like that at all.
Yeah, perfect blend of practical and CGI. And just the care and effort that went into making that seem realistic was awesome.
Yeah, really good.
Should we get into the BOLOs?
Love to. BOLO. Be on the lookout for a stormy 20th century.
Yes, that is. I had that written. I was thinking I was maybe going to steal it from you. Didn't get the chance.
That's why I went first.
This is maybe ahead of its time, because these were incredibly popular, I feel like maybe a decade ago. But BOLO Canada Goose jackets.
Oh, yeah. I'm just going to say great cold weather gear in this movie. Yes. Great jackets, great gloves, just great warmth in this movie.
Yeah, was there like a crossover promotion? Because there should have been.
It should have been. Yeah, absolutely. It seems like a lost opportunity. I piggybacked on that one with gear, but I'll go another one here. We just talked about this, but BOLO, just a beautiful opening shot.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just the care was spent.
Yes,
throughout
absolutely.
this film, and in fitting with that, I'm going to say BOLO, dedication to your job. Some really dedicated people in this movie.
People love their careers in this movie. BOLO, real news clips. So I guess there are real news clips mixed in. So they wanted to make the coverage seem like it was, real disaster. So a lot of the clips are actual clips that have happened on the news.
I like that. Some of the news elements in this, that's one of my favorite series of scenes in this.
Absolutely. The news coverage of weather is always just great.
Yes. Yes.
The only thing that gets me watching TV now, I think, is weather coverage.
It's funny. I've kind of come full circle a little bit, because growing up, my parents were always watching the Weather Channel. Yep. I don't know if you've ever seen the Weather Channel.
Of course.
And they would watch this. This was before you could look up the weather on your phone. And they had local weather, I don't know, every 13 minutes or something. And I always wanted to watch cartoons or whatever. And my parents were like, no, we have to we need to find out what the local weather is today. We got to watch the Weather Channel. And whatever would happen, they would always get distracted right when the local weather came on, and we'd miss it. They'd be like, oh, the phone rang or whatever. We got to wait. And I'd be like sitting there trying to wait to watch cartoons or whatever. And the number of times, it's like over and over and over again that they just forgot
Yeah. Same situation.
It made me hate the Weather Channel. Hated it.
Same situation in our house. And there's a lot of movies I think we've seen that were like, do phones really help things or not? This movie, I think phones would help with weather and a bunch of other scenarios. But yeah,
yes,
growing up with the same thing. And it's like the parents could never time it to come in 13 minutes. They'd leave on the Weather Channel for 13 minutes.
You had to.
And then you'd hear that little flash. They'd be in the other room vacuuming or something and then miss it. And you're right. You'd have to sit there and watch again to see the local news, which really is no news. It's probably look outside. Yeah. It's New England. Whatever the season is, it's probably crappy.
Yes, right. It's probably crappy. Stick your hand out the window. There you go. Let me watch my cartoons.
We put Doug back on.
Exactly.
BOLO, teenagers not answering the phone. Very different world back then. I remember I would get in trouble for this, not answering the phone because it was someone for the adults or bill collectors or something like that. So happens in this teenagers not answering the phone, which I think is not a thing anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't happen anymore. I'm going to go with BOLO, a fez. I don't know if we've had a fez yet.
We have not. BOLO not showing your work. We'll get more to it.
Dangerous.
We'll get to this later a little bit more.
This felt like a effect that maybe was leaned into a tad bit too much, in my opinion. But BOLO, people walking in front of the camera. There's one particular scene where it's just like, I'm just like, can we just not walk in front of the camera right now? It was very distracting. There's very important things going on behind the people in the way.
People didn't know how to navigate cameras as well back in 2004, I guess. This is a big one. BOLO, a mainframe.
Yes, I noted the same thing. It was great to be back.
Let us in the mainframe.
Yes. This is now a dated term, but BOLO, global warming.
It's a dated term?
It's now climate change.
Oh, all right. You know.
Which I guess would be more appropriate in this film as it is.
Yeah, that works. It's better. BOLO, famous landmarks. Quite a few.
BOLO, different types of computer monitors. I feel like we were right on the cusp of everyone having flat monitors. So you get a nice mix of monitors here.
Yeah, right before the flat, they were quite curved.
Yeah. And just enormous. Like really deep.
That was the biggest thing to bring in college was that computer desktop. And plop that on your new desk. BOLO, I didn't hear it, but maybe I don't know his voice, but apparently Roland Emmerich's voice does a bunch of cameos throughout the movie. So if you know his voice, then you'd be on the listen out for it.
Another listener or listen out for, but BOLO, a finger whistle.
BOLO, a 1 in a billion shot or a million shot, one of the two.
Yes. I feel like I've seen these in ads before, but BOLO, a clear refrigerator door. Never seen one in person, but
wow. Yeah, that's always like a futuristic to think that you can just see in.
Oh,
it's very revealing.
It is.
Yeah.
You gotta really keep your fridge in order.
Yeah. Which I can do now as a married man. I feel like my fridge is good, but for a long time in my life, I don't want to have people see into the fridge.
No, but I do like seeing into my own fridge. I would often open both doors. This is probably why we have global warming now. But I would just open both doors to the fridge and like to stand back and just take it all in. Maybe if I had a fully clear door, I wouldn't have had to do that.
Yeah, but there's some fun to that too. You get the cold, which is nice. You get the lean, which is nice because you can sort of like bounce a little bit. And there's a little bit of you're not supposed to do this. There's always someone who gets mad at you, whether it be your parents initially or your wife eventually for just standing too long in the fridge. So there's a little bit of like, ooh, I'm getting away with something here.
Yes, I often did not get away with it, but I was often reprimanded for that behavior.
Yeah. You come home, no one's home, and you just look in the fridge. Or ultimately just some American cheese and mustard.
Yep, right, exactly.
I don't know if you're a fan of the show, but BOLO, Louis Litt from Suits.
No, I'm not familiar. I didn't get on the craze recently.
We watched it. That's a show from like 10 years ago. We did the whole thing like 6 months ago. So
yeah,
shouldn't have had.
BOLO oxygen masks. I guess this is one of these things you hope never to see, but here they are.
BOLO, I like these in sports. These are a little bit different in this, but BOLO projections. Projections are always fun. Anything can happen.
Yes, definitely. And making projections is great.
Oh, so great. I think we Didn't we have a little run during the pandemic of looking at projecting, or it wasn't projecting, it was forecasting?
Yes.
Yes.
BOLO, the Gutenberg Bible. I think it's our first Gutenberg Bible movie. I think
so. BOLO, listening to your dad, always important. You don't see it enough.
Yep. BOLO, flying car.
BOLO, the sound of cold.
Yes. I like that sound.
Great sound.
This is kind of similar. BOLO, flags. I guess it comes along a similar time.
Not flags waving. BOLO, this is my last one. BOLO, insulation.
Yep. My last one, I guess I'll go BOLO, Chekhov's wolves.
No, yep. That was a good one. I meant to write that down. Nice. I'll go first on this because it's super simple. This category is what drink to pair with the movie. And I watched this the first time with my wife, and it was, I think, like a Saturday afternoon. When she saw how much time it was, she's like, "Oh, is this a good time to watch? Like, it's 2 hours plus." I'm like, "This is the perfect time. Is the weekend afternoon at like 2 p.m. Put this on, and don't worry about how long it is. It's 2+ hours action disaster movie. But while I'm having it, I want to just sort of, in spite of what this movie's trying to make me do, I want to dumb down a little bit and just enjoy the ride and enjoy the cold. And what I'm doing is just getting myself some Blue Mountain Coors Lights. I'm just going to keep cold Coors Lights in the fridge and have some day drinks. And I'm just going to have some really, really ice cold Coors Lights during this movie.
Yeah, I feel like I'm on the same path here. It's got to be ice cold. And for me, there's nothing as cold as a slush puppy. Like, there's no way you can drink a slush puppy and not get a brain freeze. It's the most brain freeze inducing drink known to man. So for me,
because then you don't change your actions. You get the brain freeze and it's not a deterrent. You're going to go right back to the same thing.
You're powerless. You're like, yep, this is what I signed up for when I purchased the slush puppy. I knew I was getting into this, and just that is what it is. So to match the degree of cold that you will see on screen, I think the only thing in my mind was experiencing it through the closest thing you could, which is a slush puppy.
Yeah, that's a great choice. So slush puppy, also great in the afternoon, right? You don't want a day drink, just have that slush puppy. Perfect. Or some cold Blue Mountain Coors Lights. Either way, this is going to be a blast. Enjoy. We'll see you on the other side.
Enjoy.
Meteorologists are at a loss to explain what is causing this weather and why it has taken them by surprise.
That sudden drop in temperature as half an hour ago. Mexican officials closed the border in the light of so many U.S. refugees.
Be prepared to go live to Los Angeles.
Are you getting this on camera? What you see is happening now.
Look over there behind me! That's a tornado! Yes, a twister!
This is just massive.
Lower Manhattan is virtually inaccessible.
A wall of water coming towards New York City! Everybody, get out of here!
Save as many as you can.
Slept on Cinema is brought to you by Training Ties, the ultimate shoe tying tool. If you know anyone who's struggling with shoe tying, Training Ties is the perfect solution. Or if you know anyone who just doesn't like tying their shoes, Training Ties keeps shoes tied all day long. Say no to Velcro and yes to independence with Training Ties.
Welcome back. We made it.
Yeah, we made it. Survived.
It was a lot of fun. It was interesting because it gave me major Independence Day vibes. It was sort of like,
same
I
director.
mentioned that early on again, and I liked that. Like, Independence Day is one of the greatest movies of all time, and this had that sort of early scientist who, like, no one was listening to him, but he was right all along, and then he has to like go through this like city, and the cities are getting destroyed. A lot of Independence Day vibes, but in a really good way.
Is it the same director? Did Emmerich?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes sense. I agree. Definitely Independence Day vibes, and just a blast. Like, anytime you're going to make a big budget disaster movie like this, it's almost impossible to screw it up to me. And
Totally.
they didn't. It was great. People are going to have their problems, and we'll get to it a little bit. But if you just, like we said before, just dumb down a little bit and stop getting so involved in the politics or whatever, this movie is a blast.
Yeah. It's just a great disaster movie. Like, you don't need to overthink it.
Nope. Who cares about the why in most disaster movies? I don't care. Just go.
Right.
Start with disasters.
Right.
Show me
Exactly.
more footing. Speaking of which, let's get to our draft. What is your number one pick from this movie?
So I had a couple things to choose from, but it's been a while since I've taken just the main guy. I'm going with Gyllenhaal.
Yeah.
I thought Gyllenhaal was so good, and it's like kind of an early role for him. And it's also kind of a tricky role because it's sometimes disaster movies can be a little challenging because there's not like an alien you're fighting against or a specific thing that you're fighting against. This is just, especially in this one where it's just weather. Like, there's not a fight against something. So I feel like the acting and the person you cast in that main role is like really, really important because a lot of it is kind of more personal than some of these other action films. And he nailed it. Like, it was kind of a tough role because of that. And he was really, really good.
It's hard to play the, like, he wasn't really this kid, but it was like not the sniveling, like, loser. He wasn't a loser at all. He was just had a tough time talking to, girls. He was a bit of a nerd. His parents are divorced, and still he came out looking like everyone's favorite guy in the movie. Like, he wasn't too smarmy. He wasn't a loser. He was smart enough. He was trying to help other people, and I just pulled it off perfectly. And it reminded me of, like, we're so used to, I just watched The Roadhouse of Gyllenhaal. And it's like you completely forget that we started off with, like, angsty kid actor Gyllenhaal, where he's like Bubble Boy and Donnie Darko and this. And it's like, oh yeah, that's how we first saw this guy, and he's so good in a role.
I mean, he's had an amazing career. I was thinking, like, why don't we hear people talking about Gyllenhaal as like one of our greatest actors?
Do you think it's coming?
I think it's overdue. It should be coming. It should have been coming 10 years ago. It doesn't make any sense to me. Some of his roles, he has these really iconic roles. He has a lot of breadth of roles. Like, his range is remarkable. He kind of has it all. I don't understand why he doesn't get more due. Maybe he does, and I just don't know about it. But I feel like he should be talked about as one of our greatest actors. I was also thinking about the sort of the Gyllenhaal and Ryan Gosling comparison. Like, I feel like that's kind of a good sort of who you got question. Because I was thinking about it. They've had actually sort of very similar careers. I'm sure they were up for a lot of the same roles, but they're very different actors. But they're both, had a lot of success young, have had very varied careers and roles. I think Gyllenhaal's probably had more varied roles. Gosling's probably had a little bit more success, but by just a hair critically.
So a movie comes out next week. You don't know the premise, the genre, anything, but it's a Gosling. You're like, oh, it's a Gosling movie or a Gyllenhaal movie. You don't know any of the specifics of the movie. Which one are you a little bit more excited to watch?
I'm Gyllenhaal.
I'm Gyllenhaal as well. But you pulled up a very good comparison. I think Gosling is neck and neck. They're 1A, 1B in the same lane.
I think that's right. And I think, obviously with Barbie last year, I feel like Gosling is sort of more, there's some recency bias probably with Gosling. And Gosling's awesome. I think he's had some really, really iconic roles too. But yeah, I think I'm a Gyllenhaal guy.
Yeah, absolutely. He's in that group of like the Clooney's or Brad Pitts. It's kind of like Justin Timberlake, I guess, where everyone likes him. Like, girls like him, guys like him. There's no one's like, oh, he's a loser, he's a jerk. There's none of that stuff that comes out. It's Gyllenhaal. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my first pick, I'm glad you took Gyllenhaal, because while there wasn't an alien or a monster in this disaster movie, there was a bit of a looming presence that was cool and kind of acted as if sort of like a Jaws, what you didn't see, and it was just all about the buildup. I'm going to take the growing frost, the cold.
Oh, yeah.
That's the monster to me, where that's what they were literally running from multiple times in this movie. They see the frost coming, the flag goes dead, or they, either Gyllenhaal or Quaid see the little sign that, oh, this is the eye, this is the actual thing, this is a different kind of cold. And then when he's running in the library away from it, and it like cracks the door, and they have to throw more books in there, and it's like you hear the sounds that go along with the cold too. Is just I found myself just like turning up the movie more and more when that was coming, just to hear that. And it's so weird how that's so. It's just like a sound of ice being formed. It's not really that cool, but it was that cool.
It was so cool.
It gave you that little sense of what it could do. But starting with that Chekhov's like woolly mammoth, right, where it's like it looks like it was just eating, and it froze that quick, and then that happened to the helicopter driver,
Mm-hmm.
and it just showed you what it could do. So watch out.
Yeah, I think you nailed some of the things that I think made this so great, in that it's something like it being cold is just a feeling, right?
Yeah.
So that's like a really hard thing to convey on screen, but they did it in these really interesting ways that did make you feel that feeling. It's the sound that's almost like glass breaking type sound that sort of creeps up on you. It's the freezing flags. It's that like frost creeping along. It's all those little things that just, they perfectly conveyed that icy coldness, which is really tough to do because you don't see cold really.
Right.
But they nailed it.
I had never, if you had asked me to like, what are signs of cold that doesn't involve like snow? How could you depict that? I'm not sure I would know, but they did a great job in this. But like the sound of it and having just ice form quickly and cracking the substance underneath, it was just done in such a cool way. And having the air become so still, like that little feature alone was just like, oh, that's so cool.
Yep. Yeah, it was amazing. It's a great pick.
I have so many like sleeper picks here.
I'm in the same boat. I have the exact same situation.
Everything's gonna be like, all right, I guess that works. But I love it. I'm gonna go with. I'm not sure if I'm gonna put this right, but the warning signs before things happen, like the little things, like, oh, that's a little off. What is that? 13 degrees on a buoy? That must be wrong. That would never happen. 2 going bad, 3 going bad. That's remote. That could not happen. And it's little signs like the rising and falling of the temperatures, the buoy heights, hurricane anomalies, where like twisters are in the wrong place, the temperatures are off, wind chimes spinning too much, just like little things to show that something is coming. And it's like stuff that wouldn't even register.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like no one knew in Jaws, the second reference to Jaws, how many barrels would be crazy to go under, right? Until they said it.
Yep.
And then they were just like, what? 3 buoys? It's already too late. We're all dead. And we don't know what that means, and it has to be like walked back for us to show us what that actually means.
Yeah. I mean, it's great because that's how these things would happen, right? It's not like we have like the world's greatest disaster of all time alarm that just goes off and you're like, oh, well, that alarm for the world's greatest disaster of all time just went off. We're screwed. It's all these little things that just start adding up. And you're like, well, that doesn't seem right. And that doesn't seem right either. And all of a sudden, everything is the worst thing ever.
It's like a hurricane, right? But it's forming over land. Like just little switches like that where it seems like it's a normal thing, but it's completely different. And you're right. You wouldn't be able to diagnose that right away, being like, that's the craziest storm of all time. You would have to be like explaining why it is in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just the ominousness of small things predicting something big coming. I also like, I don't know if this goes in there or not, but when like what seems like is the big event happens, and it's always oh no, it's going to get worse. Like that wasn't it. That hail that we had in Tokyo or the twist, that's not it.
Yeah.
There's more coming. That's
just the beginning.
That's a light tap. That's a little jet.
Yeah, that's great. My second pick, I'm going to take the title. I'm going to take the title for a specific reason. And I think that a lot of the criticism of this was that this isn't how climate change works. These things take a long time, and this is supposed to go over hundreds of years or whatever. And this is totally unrealistic. And I like The Day After Tomorrow because it's it's a bit of a lampshade. It's a little bit of saying, yes, we know this is about the future, but really this is about the day after tomorrow. And once you just acknowledge that this is happening in a really short time span, and like, yes, we know that. We know that's kind of ridiculous. Look at the title. It wipes that off. You're like, okay, We get it. They're obviously condensing this into something shorter range to make it a useful movie. No one's going to watch a movie that takes place over the course of 100 years. Like, checking in. Yep, it's still getting a little bit worse. That's ridiculous.
That buoy moved a whole degree. Like, no one cares about that. We need 13 degrees in a day.
Yeah. And I feel like anyone who had that comment just wasn't paying attention to the title. The title clears that all up. Yes, we know this is all about climate change, but we're talking about the day after tomorrow. We're not talking about whatever time frame you want. We're talking about the day after tomorrow. That's what this movie's about. There it is.
And it's so funny. The day after tomorrow, this is happening now. This isn't something you have to worry about, like your kids' generations down the line and what they have to deal with. This is now. So in order for that to happen, we're going to use some science to explain why it's happening the day after tomorrow. Don't get lost in that. It's just a way to tell you that this is happening very, very soon.
Yes, it's just a shortcut to the future. That's what the day after tomorrow is.
That's great. I think
that was brilliant.
Some people had a problem with the day after tomorrow. They didn't, whatever, and the Rotten Tomatoes critics were pointing that out. But I love the way you pointed out. It is a giant lampshade over this movie that just makes it like Teflon. Like, what did you think it was going to be? The name of the movie is tomorrow.
Right, exactly.
Great pick.
My third pick, and I think I probably have two sleepers here, but that's all right.
It's all right.
I'm going with just having a really great door. Like, they obviously have this great door in the library that somehow saves all these people and keeps this horrific cold that we just talked about. They just closed this massive, fantastic, giant wooden door, and they're safe. And there's nothing like having a really great door. Like a real sturdy door that keeps the outside out, the inside in. Because and conversely, there's nothing as bad as having a bad door that's creaky and drafty and gets blown open in the wind. That thing sucks. But having a good door with some heft to it is just fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely a great pick, and I totally agree with this. Now you live in a really nice house. That seems like it would have.
We have some good doors.
We
have our front door. It's very wide.
Yeah,
it's got some heft to it. It's a great door.
In the front door, right? It's not just the one door that swings open, isn't there?
It's like we have like a screen door and then another door. It is just one, but it is a very, very wide door.
Oh, it isn't wide. Okay, it feels that big. Yeah, solid doors. I haven't reached the point. I feel like that's like old money to have. You're not like in your 20s with great doors.
Yeah,
you got
to work your way up there.
Yeah, work your way up there, and you've dealt with doors that are, like you said, like flapping in the breeze and just like causing problems. You just want that sturdy door. The way I live, where I've ever lived, if there was ever this cold snap coming for us, there's no way my doors would keep it out. And there was another door that Quaid found, which was, I know, was a refrigerator door, but that was a great one that allowed all that cold out too. This movie could be just called like Heavy Doors. I'm not going to pick this, but just you mentioned the room. Hopefully you don't pick this, but I just want to add the fireplace behind that door.
Oh yeah, great one.
Incredible. Yeah, great pick with the door. Was that your third pick?
That was my third pick. Yep.
Good pick. So my turn here. This doesn't happen anymore, but I kind of miss it, where everyone huddling around a TV together to catch the news at the same time.
Yep.
They used to show, it would be like a cliche thing to do in a movie is to a TV store, show everyone outside, like watching the TV. And that's basically what this was. There's only one way to get the news that's the most current. It's channel, 4, 5, or 7, or whatever it may be. And everyone stands around the news, catching news at the same time. It's not like no one's scrolling on their phones. No one has this source or that source. There's like two or three.
The news.
News. Here's live footage of what's happening somewhere. And that's it. But just gathering around, I think of like I remember back in the day, like the O.J. Simpson car chase. I remember they pushed the TV into our classroom so we could like watch what was happening.
Wheel it in on the TV cart.
Exactly. So everyone could watch it at the same time and see what was happening. That stuff is lost now. I mean, not only do you not have like show times for, watching TGIF on a Friday or any shows and you just put anything on it anytime you want, but that like you can't do anything. There's nothing else going on in the world or, in the United States. There's this on to watch the news and everyone stops to watch the news.
Oh, yeah. It's great.
Yeah, it's great.
I like that. Great pick.
And I'll probably have some honorable mentions, but I like these disaster movies. I was thinking a lot of Dante's Peak, and it happens in a lot of disaster movies, but finding characters through the first watch that are really good and they're nice characters and they're pure, and you're like, you're gonna die in a heroic way. And I just want to see how good of a character they are and how not too big they are, because if they get too big, they might survive. But if it's a nice person along the way, just being like, you're gonna die in a heroic way, and I can't wait. I thought it happened to the wife, or the ex-wife, staying behind. I thought something would happen there, but
I was shocked that she survived.
Right, but yeah.
Yeah, I like that. 'Cause you watch enough of these films, you start to get a feel for it.
Yep. And you're just like, you're being too nice, you're too good, something's gonna happen to you. You're being a really loyal friend going along to go get his kid. I don't know if that's a good idea.
Nice. My sleeper pick here, and this brings me back to high school, but it is doing a particular school activity just for the trip. So clearly there was this, I don't even remember what it was, a debate club. It wasn't debate. It was like
science
questions, trivia, whatever it was. It's clearly some sort of school club that people only did because they got a trip to New York. And when you're in high school, a trip anywhere away from home is like the most fantastic thing. A trip with your friends or anybody that you go to school with away from home. I did so many things in high school just because they had a trip involved at some point in connection with whatever the activity was. So there was nothing quite like that school trip away from home, and you would do all these sort of ridiculous activities just to be able to participate in that.
Yeah, I mean, he signed up for a girl. He had no care about what the decathlon or whatever it was about. That's a good one. I don't think I signed up for anything like that. I don't think I ever went on a trip outside of like a 5th grade trip to New York.
I had I think it was a mock trial tournament in Nebraska.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I had a class about government that took a trip to DC.
Need the DC trip. Cool.
Yep. I think those are the main ones. Those are the most memorable ones. But yeah, like I never would have done that stuff if they're not for the trips.
Of course not. Yeah. You don't like trials that much in spite of being a lawyer.
Yeah, right.
I have an I have like 5 anti-picks. What I'm going to pick an anti-pick of my picks here for you. Showing your work. I had that whole little thing there.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably because I am a former teacher, but even my wife got into this with like, well, you shouldn't have to show your work if you get it right. At his age, it is absolutely ridiculous at whatever level of class he's in to think that you couldn't show your work. And it has been explained to a high schooler a bazillion times that it's not about getting the question right. It's we want to see the process. So if you go wrong, when the questions get harder, we can see where you went wrong. And it's so annoying that dad jumped on his side, like, I'm going to call that teacher, blah, 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 blah. There's like every single class, there's like 2 to 4 kids who were like, I'm smart. I can do it in my head. Watch me. It's like, there's nothing special or unique about this. And the problem is when you're stuck, you're going to get really frustrated because you have no idea where you went wrong. So the teacher in me says, I didn't like that whole discussion in the car, taking the kid's side.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because it's also, there is an element of learning that involves being able to explain how you got to your answer, not just for your own learning, but that's part of learning is then also teaching.
Yes.
So if you're not explaining how you got there, it's sort of like it gets you in the habit of explaining things, which then as you're learning more things, it helps you to learn more complex.
Yeah. And it'll help you find the holes in what you know when you realize you can't explain what you even did.
Yes. Because maybe the answer isn't really the point, right? Maybe it's something along the way of figuring out the answer. And if you're jumping to things or like maybe you happen to get the right answer, it's important to know how you got there.
Yeah. You missed the whole exercise. So there's a nice little nerdy part for listeners.
Show your work, everyone.
Show your work. But also don't risk your life to save your buddy's kid. Stay home. That's ridiculous.
The 2 lessons from the film: show your work and maybe stay home.
Superlative. This episode we have favorite weather anomaly.
And that's kind of the whole thing, right? There were so many good ones to choose from. I went back and forth on this, but I think I'm going to take And this seems a little tame. This is probably even one of the ones that you said was sort of like, well, this is just the beginning. I think I'm taking the giant hail. And I think in part because it was one of the most vicious things that we saw. Like all the other ones I got, the dueling twisters, the flood, you sort of see these things, but you don't see as much of the actual human impact. But you see some of these giant hails just like taking people out in Tokyo.
Huge.
And I wanted some of that viciousness. And I feel like the hail was the most vicious of at least the most viscerally vicious of the natural disasters. So I'm going with the hail. And it also, I'd sent you a news article about this when we were shortly after watching this, that this is very real, that hail has been getting significantly larger over recent years to the point where they had run out of descriptors. First it was quarter size and golf ball size, baseball size, softball size. For the first time, they had to describe something as DVD sized, which instantly felt dated, but at least we all now at least know what size that is. Because I think they said, if we say grapefruit, there's a lot of different size grapefruits, but DVD, exactly what that is. And
even though it's outdated, I feel like it makes sense because anyone who cares about the weather is probably at least 30 years old.
Yes.
Right. So they understand what a DVD is.
Yes. And I did like, for us movie fans, they didn't say CD. They went DVD.
Right.
I like that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a little note.
But it's also just kind of terrifying that these things can happen quickly, and then it's just a giant ball of ice out is coming to smash your skull in. That's real.
Yeah, they did a great job too of make it even more sinister with the guy having to make that choice. Can I make it? He knows he's probably not going to survive long where he was, but if he could just get under that truck, he can make it. And 3 steps away before just getting clonked on the head.
Yep.
That whole little scene, a little game he had to play, taking us inside of his decision, I thought was great.
Yep.
I guess it's the cold part, the disaster, but my favorite weather anomaly was it being so cold that it froze those helicopters. I think when they showed the helicopters going in there and they're like, what's going on? And they had to do one of those, the fuel froze. And what temperature? We have to look it up. Negative 150 degrees. I think they were using Fahrenheit, which is a little crazy for scientists. But
yeah, they did that just for us.
For us, yeah. But yeah, I think it was such a cool idea to show gasoline freezing inside of a helicopter, and then those 3 helicopters flying to that such cool looking storm, and they just I guess it's nothing cool really because it just the helicopter stops spinning and it just falls. But the way it looked, and it was just
the way it happens.
It was just so cool to me, and I almost took the tornadoes in LA.
The tornadoes were really cool, and obviously now we're starting to see these ads for Twisters, the Twister sequel. But it's going to be tough for that movie to top the dueling series of Twisters in this film.
Yeah, and they all combined together. That whole LA scene was, I almost took that
so
apart.
Cool.
Draft and people not knowing how to react and just going at the tornadoes.
Yeah.
In LA. Let's see. Next topic, bumper sticker. You have a good bumper sticker line from this movie? I struggled a little bit.
I struggled as well. And when I'm struggling, I just go back to the well. So maybe it's not a great bumper sticker for a lot of people, but I'm going, give me the mainframe and let me prove it.
Damn it. That should be the quote for our whole entire podcast.
Yes. It's I like obviously the mainframe aspect, but it's also sort of I can prove it. I just don't have enough computing power. That's the problem here. Right. Whatever I'm saying, I know I'm right, and I can show you. I just can't show you yet.
Just need the mainframe to show you. They don't even address it. They're just no. You're just not getting in the mainframe. That's a good one. I struggled in. I guess my fallback for bumper sticker stuff is I just picture somebody I don't like, and it's usually somebody who has a bumper sticker. Usually have a pause, so it's save as many as you can, and it's just I don't know. It's gonna be I feel like it's gonna have a fish with a plastic ring around its neck, and it's save the earth or something like that. Make the save as many as you can thing mean whatever you want it to be, but it's basically you're not doing enough for people or the planet is what it means.
Yeah. You could go any number of directions with that too. I mean, you could see, I feel like that's a big one that you need to look for other stickers on the car for context.
Right. Yeah.
Like you see, you could have like the Jesus fish next to it. It means something totally different.
Completely different. Yeah. You have to see what avenue they're going through.
Yeah.
To save people from what? Yeah. Do you need Jesus? Do you not? Do you need science? I don't know. Do you
Right.
Who knows?
I like that.
And one change to be a blockbuster. Before we get to that, let's just do our length of movie. Too short, perfect, or a little or too long.
I mean, anything over 2 hours, obviously, and this just barely crept over 2 hours, but anything over 2 hours, I'm always going to say trim it, especially for a movie like this. You know, this isn't a big think piece.
No.
Despite what some people tried to get out of it, but it's a disaster movie. It's action. You're not in it for, anything with a intermission. So I think trim a little, get it down to an hour 45 even, and that's going to be your sweet spot.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree on the length.
And I think that ties into my one change a little bit. My one change is, and I guess we should also preface this. This movie made over $500 million with hundreds of millions more on the back end. So our biggest blockbuster yet by a wide margin. But nevertheless, one change to be a blockbuster, I would just say fewer characters. Like we were maybe a third of the way in, maybe even half of the way in, and we're still meeting new people. And there was some benefit to that. Like I feel like we got to know a lot of these different people and different characters, but I didn't need to know as many of them. I think that you could have trimmed out almost half the characters and just stuck to the core people in the film, and it wouldn't have been much different.
I think that's true. Yeah, you can definitely get lost in not really even caring about like who's that over there now. Whatever, sure.
Yeah, it's like still like more people.
Yeah, like the the other guy who was hitting on Emmy Rossum's character.
Yes, right, exactly. There's no real need for him.
He stopped caring about his brother in Philly. I guess that it wasn't anymore. That's a good one. I guess I just liked the disasters that they showed so much. Where I think I wanted more.
Yes.
I think they kind of got like, some people had a lot of problems with them just being in the library for half the movie. And I didn't mind the quest to go save his son. I just think along the way, something more than just showing like Dennis Quaid in some snow with some snowshoes, like trudging through the snow. I would have liked to see we saw the cold thing kill one person, like quickly. Let's see that kill a whole entire city, or some more destruction. We've got a couple cities, but like we didn't see much more else what was happening to like the whole northern hemisphere was basically covered in ice. So I feel like we could have seen a little bit more of the disasters happening along the way.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean my spin-off, as I'm now about to say it out loud, I realize that my spin-off really might just be a one change, a different change, because I'm just remaking the film with a couple of changes. So maybe a little category theft here, but my spinoff, I think we're due for a remake. I think that the CGI technologies are such that we could maybe not even have to invest as much cash into it and get some really good effects. But my drastic difference is I want this to be far more vicious. And it's similar to how I liked The Hail. I want to see, I want to see people's bodies freezing and then shattering like Terminator. I want them running out of food and eating people. Like I want the impacts of these disasters to be more. I want to feel them in just a bad way.
Is there like a gory disaster movie that does that? I feel a lot of times it's kind of like and they just get like smashed, but you don't really see it. It's off camera. But is there one where they're just like exploding and they're eating each other outside of This Is the End?
There's gotta be. I mean, I was just watching. It's not really. I guess I was just watching Planet Terror, which is incredibly gory. Yeah. But it's not. That's more of like a zombie attack situation. That's not like a natural disaster. And I did just watch recently Alive, which made me think of eating people.
Yep.
But that's done in like a kind of very tasteful way.
Yeah, it is.
I'm not talking about that.
Tasteful way, yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if there is just like the gory disaster movie, because usually that means that there's like zombies.
Yeah, right. It's not just like
not a volcano that like, oh my God, we're showing everyone's legs get burned off slowly.
Yeah, right. We're due.
My spin-off idea this is called The Day After Tomorrow, The Great Meltdown. So this takes place now with current Gyllenhaal, Quaid, and Emmy Rossum. So there's another projection that Quaid worked on with Gyllenhaal as they grew up. So 20 years has gone by. All this has happened. And it looks like there's going to be a great thaw coming of all that ice that happened. And with that is going to cause another reverse of the climate and blah, 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 natural disasters. So what ends up happening is Emmy Rossum and Gyllenhaal have a kid. That kid is away doing a similar trip to what Gyllenhaal talked about with his dad. They had that like 10-day boat trip or whatever. So their kid is with Dennis Quaid out observing some stuff somewhere. And then all this happens. The world collapses around them. And then Jake Gyllenhaal and Emmy now have to go save his dad, Dennis Quaid, and their son and trek across the opposite of the cold coming, but the warm is coming. And all the disasters that come with that, volcanoes popping up and everything that happens to go save Dennis Quaid and the kid.
Yeah. I like it. And let's make it gory.
Let's just go. Yeah, and get gory. It'll be really gross.
Yeah. I think that's way better than just remaking it, because we're essentially remaking it, but it's a whole new movie. Let's make it gory. Make it R-rated, make it nasty. Let's do this.
We'll bring in like that clown from the Terrifier for some reason, just for the cameo. Just do some gory stuff. Well, which also, like, this movie did show the best of people when all this happened in New York. Everyone's just trying to help each other. There's no one out causing problems at all. Everyone's just like, hey guys, this way, I'll help.
Yeah. Right. The biggest problem was the disagreement over what was the best way to help people. Should we leave the library or stay? And that was the biggest conflict, except putting aside the like political disagreement in the beginning of the film.
When you really realize when you watch like The Walking Dead and stuff is, there's zombies, but the worst thing is people.
Yes.
Away from other people.
Yep.
I think that's it for my spin-off. Other things we didn't get to. Oh, the little stats that, like, the ocean rose 25 feet in a matter of seconds. Like, that's one of those things where is that a lot? I don't know.
Yeah,
sure.
Right. That sounds like a lot, but what do I know?
Well, I call them can't be right statements. Like, that can't be right. It's supposed to be months? No, hours. No, not days. It's hours. And it just keeps going.
Yeah. Yep.
What do you think about this? So I always compare stuff to, I call it the Home Alone scenario with my wife. I think a lot of times people show lots of effort, even though that's not the best thing to do. So it comes from the mom bothering everyone, doing all this stuff to get back to her son.
Just take the flight. Wait for the next flight.
The dad just took the original flight and showed up a minute later, and didn't cause all this hysterics and all that nonsense. So Dennis Quaid's character shows up at the library after all that. His buddy dies on the trek. They have to hike from Philadelphia to Manhattan, barely surviving. And then, an hour later, a bunch of helicopters come and save all the people who are alive in New York. They could have just gone outside the library and been picked up. So, like, it's a little, maybe you could just let it happen, let the storm blow over. You didn't actually save him.
Yeah, that's true. He could have just followed his own advice. Try to write it out.
Try to write it out and not get your friend killed. Also, one little nitpick, I would have liked to see Frank fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why didn't we get that?
I don't know. The sled was the coolest death in the video, in the movie.
Well, in the sequel, we'll see it.
We'll see him fall.
We'll make sure that exact same scene happens.
And also reminded me a bit of Judge Dredd in New York, where all the poor people down below die. And then the high ones are the ones who are rich and survive.
Yep. That makes sense. It checks out.
And that's it for me.
Yeah, I didn't have any other notes. I think I got everything.
Cool. All right. So what are we doing next?
Next up, we have same director doing a little director double feature, and maybe I'd say a similar feel, but a very different subject. We're doing 2012.
2012 disaster double feature.
Can't wait for this one. Another classic of cable TV. It's another one of these movies that maybe you've never even seen the whole movie through, but you've seen parts of it 1,000 times.
Everyone's seen at least one between one commercial break. At least 13
exactly.
minutes.
Sure, I'll watch this.
Awesome. This was a blast, and catch you next time. Later.
Yeah, later.